Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Soul Land 2 Part 186 based on novel. So let's start. Therefore, even though he knew that his element was disadvantageous, he still chose to use his overwhelming strength without hesitation. As a rank 97 transcendent Dolor, he relied on the strength of his soul power to instantly expand his radiant phoenix's flames. The sparring arena was only so big, as a transcendent Dolor, he was entirely capable of covering it completely in his phoenix flames. When that happened, Hu Yuhao would naturally no longer be able to keep his domain up, and thus would be forced into the open. Furthermore, Yang Xiaozhe would be launching an all-round attack against him in the process. But something astonished Yang Xiaozhe as he attempted to do so. As his phoenix flames fanned outwards, he realized that they didn't immediately melt the snowflakes dancing through the air when they came into contact with one another. In fact, not only were they melting slowly, but they were also emanating intense chills in the process, which was causing him to expend more energy on his phoenix flames that he'd calculated. What's happening? Yang Xiaozhe had already channeled more than 60% of his soul power, but his phoenix flames had only managed to extend 5 meters out from him. Furthermore, the more they continued to expand, the more snowflakes they encountered from Hu Yuhao's snowy dance of ultimate ice, and the colder the chilly air released by those snowflakes got. Yang Xiaozhe quickly realized that, to his surprise, he'd been suppressed, and that Hu Yuhao was actually using the quality of his soul power to suppress his own cultivation advantage. How is this possible? Their martial soul fusion should only give them the strength of a newly minted title Dolor. How could his ultimate ice be so strong? Tang Wutong doesn't possess any ice-type abilities. If Yang Xiaozhe could see Hu Yuhao's current state, he would understand why he was at such a disadvantage. The star anise mysterious ice grass was swaying gently atop Hu Yuhao's shoulder, while 4 other silhouettes floated behind him. All 5 of his spirits were currently aiding him. Of Hu Yuhao's 5 great spirits, the Skydream Ice Worm possessed both ice-type abilities and spiritual power, while the other 4 all possessed ultimate ice. When Hu Yuhao had fused with the Ice Bear King, Little Bai hadn't just become his spirit and soul ring, he'd also improved his ultimate ice's quality once again. According to the Snow Empress words, the lowest temperature that Hu Yuhao could reach with his ultimate ice was 220 degrees below zero. This temperature was already equivalent to what the Ice Empress could reach when she was at full strength. The Ice Empress had been ranked 7th among the 10 great savage beasts. Even though she hadn't been equivalent to an ultimate Dolor when she was at full strength, she hadn't been that far off. All 5 of his spirits had appeared simultaneously. Even though they couldn't boost his soul power with their amplifications, they could still boost his element as much as possible. Furthermore, Blizzard was the soul skill that the Ice Bear King had bestowed Hu Yuhao with for his 8th soul ring. Blizzard wasn't just a normal soul skill when it was fused into his snowy dance of ultimate ice, it was considered a formidable integrated soul skill that could be further amplified by his spirits. This was why it had managed to accomplish a certain level of suppression against even Yang Xiaozhe's rank 97 Radiant Phoenix. A faint smile gradually appeared on Yang Xiaozhe's face as he felt the pressure exuded on him. He nodded lightly and exclaimed, "Good, very good." After all, the more powerful Hu Yuhao was, the happier he was. This practice battle had originally been intended to figure out the exact extent of Hu Yuhao's strength anyway. After he finished speaking, Yang Xiaozhe's expression suddenly became solemn. He placed one hand above the other, with his palms facing each other. The next moment, his entire body became completely golden, just like when he defended himself against Hu Yuhao's spiritual shock. What was different this time was that gentle golden hues were emanating from his dantian, and a small yellow phoenix seemed to be frolicking in front of his dantian. Once this little golden phoenix emerged, his phoenix flames, which had been initially suppressed, seemed to almost become material and liquefy as they blazed outwards. This time, any snowflakes that the golden liquid touched were immediately vaporized. The extremely high temperatures brought about by this golden liquid immediately dispelled the low temperatures brought about by Hu Yuhao's ultimate ice, as well as immediately beat back his snowy dance of ultimate ice. Receiving such a rude shock, Hu Yuhao had no choice but to withdraw his domain. He'd almost instantly realized that if were to continue maintaining his snowy dance of ultimate ice, that his soul power would be completely expended in a matter of seconds. And he was expending Haodong power, which didn't solely belong to him. Yang Xiaosha reappeared in front of them, before looking at Hui Yuhao and nodding gently as he said, "Little junior brother, your ultimate ice's quality was quite impressive. What did you feel?" Hui Yuhao was momentarily surprised, but his expression quickly changed somewhat as he blurted out, "You used a self-invented soul skill to augment your own soul skills and soul power." Yang Xiaosha smiled faintly and said, "Yes, this is a technique that I came up with some years ago and relied on to become Dean of the Martial Soul Department. You have to understand this a bit more. Even though soul tools are developing at a quickening pace in today's world, there's still boundless potential in soul masters that's waiting to be discovered." "Yes," Hui Yuhao acknowledged respectfully. He knew that Yang Xiaosha was giving him guidance with his status as his elder senior brother. Yang Xiaosha tilted his head and smiled. "You don't have to be dejected. I used my soul core's strength when I broke your domain just now. Your ultimate ice martial soul doesn't yet have a soul core, nor is your soul's quality as concentrated as mine. Furthermore, my self-invented soul skill augmented my radiant phoenix's flames and raised my soul skill's quality instantaneously to achieve such an effect. Do you understand when I say it like this?" A thought occurred to Hui Yuhao after hearing Yang Xiaosha's words, and he seemed to understand something, yet at the same time wasn't quite able to place what it was despite trying as hard as he could to puzzle it out. Yang Xiaosha smiled. "All right, that's enough for today. We might not learn as much if we get greedy for more. I know that both you and Tang Wutong's strengths haven't been completely unleashed, but I hope that you two will improve even more during the next 3 years. The next time you two challenge me, I won't show any mercy. Thank you for fulfilling our wishes, eldest senior brother." Hui Yuhao got down on his knees in front of Yang Xiaosha. Even though Yang Xiaosha hadn't said much to them, what he had said and the battle they'd had were enough to benefit him greatly. The person who was most capable of guiding and advising Hui Yuhao in Shrek Academy wasn't Elder Xian, but rather Yang Xiaosha. The reason for that was because Yang Xiaosha could be considered to be of the same generation as Hui Yuhao, since they were both Elder Mu's disciples. However, Yang Xiaosha had become Elder Mu's disciple a lot earlier than Hui Yuhao had, so he had a much deeper understanding of Elder Mu's abilities. Thus, Hui Yuhao needed some time to digest what he'd just learned from the battle they'd just fought. Elder Xian opened the protective dome and walked towards Yang Xiaosha with a faint smile on his face. "Why didn't you give those two little fellows a little more pressure?" Yang Xiaosha smiled back and said, "Sometimes, too much pressure isn't a good thing. Yuhao doesn't need pressure right now, he's able to sense danger clearly as it is. He must have felt and learned a lot of things from our battle. Furthermore, and to be frank, I'm a little afraid of this kid. He gave me a good one, and I'm still not sure which one of his abilities gave me goosebumps. It gave me a strong sense of danger. Even if I was able to completely suppress him if we continued, I was afraid to be caught off guard, and that I'd end up losing." "Eh?" Elder Xian stared at Yang Xiaosha, his expression changing to one of surprise. "You were afraid that you'd lose?" Yang Xiaosha forced a smile as he said, "Yes. It's not like I can hurt them, after all. And considering the fact that I couldn't unleash any killing moves, I might actually be hurt if those two kids were to fight with their full strength. I don't know what Yuhao used on me, but that sense of danger is still around, even now." Elder Xian chuckled and said, "I felt it too. This kid is really quite different. He's been standing on a whole different level ever since he broke through and obtained his 8th soul ring. What he needs most right now is more time to accumulate his strength. I just hope that he manages to grow up as quickly as possible." Yang Xiaosha continued, "I'm worried that we're being counterproductive by forcing him to grow too quickly. Therefore, I'm not going to give them any more pressure. Yuhao has managed to reach an extraordinary standard with his ultimate ice, and that probably has something to do with his spirits. The temperature of his ultimate ice is also the strongest I've ever seen. At the very least, it's never appeared before in the history of the Academy. If I hadn't used my primordial phoenix flames, I might not have been able to touch him. I want to see the standard his ultimate ice soul power can reach after he obtains his soul core. From what I can tell, even without using his and Tang Wutong's Haodong power, he should be able to give typical title Doluo a good fight." Elder Xian nodded and said, "He should be able to grow up within 3 years. However, I'm not sure if the continent's 3 native empires will be able to hold on that long. Hui Yuhao and Tang Wutong immediately returned the Sea God's Pavilion after they left. Just as Yang Xiaozhe had predicted, they both had some revelations from the battle they'd just fought, and needed to internalize what they'd learned as soon as possible. Furthermore, Hui Yuhao couldn't use his 3 ultimate Haodong skills anymore, which had quite an effect on him. He needed to make some adjustments to his fighting style, since he couldn't use them anymore. Fusing self-invented soul skills with those from soul rings was something entirely new to Hui Yuhao. It was something that Shrek Academy's curriculum never even touched. Based on the abilities that Yang Xiaozhe had just displayed, it was probably a technique that could only be cultivated by a soul dolor, at the very least. Thus, this was the most suitable time for him to start learning about such a concept. Hui Yuhao wasn't the only one who'd had revelations. Tang Wutong was the same. They both went back to Hui Yuhao's room and crossed their legs on the beds, placing their palms together. They channeled Haodong power as they cultivated. This was the first time that they'd cultivated together since their martial soul fusion. Compared to before, their Haodong power was much denser and vaster. Hui Yuhao immediately felt his soul power improving, as well as the manifold mysterious ice essence within his body being almost completely assimilated. What Yang Xiaozhe hadn't known was that the main reason for his ultimate ice's rapid rate of improvement and its temperature being so low was due to the manifold mysterious ice essence. Hui Yuhao hadn't unleashed his full strength during the practice battle, nor had he truly unleashed his spirits, which also needed to be considered as part of his fighting strength. Hui Yuhao's spirits were different from those of most soul masters. His spirit's consciousnesses had been stabilized through the manifold mysterious ice essence, thus they themselves possessed a certain level of strength. Once they were fully unleashed, they would be able to support and complement one another. Plus, with the amount of experience that the Snow Empress and the Ice Empress had, they'd probably have been able to hold out a bit longer against Yang Xiaozhe, even though they couldn't possibly have defeated him. Hui Yuhao and Tang Wutong placed their palms against each other's, after which their soul power rippled and undulated continuously within their bodies. Hui Yuhao's soul power improved conspicuously with every circulation. Even though a soul master needed an immense amount of soul power to increase their cultivation rank by even a single rank after they became a soul dolor, Hui Yuhao still felt that he'd be able to reach the threshold of becoming a title dolor during the next 3 years with his current cultivation speed. As someone who possessed an ultimate martial soul, once he became a title dolor, he'd have the strength to challenge a normal transcendent dolor by simply relying on his martial soul's strength. As time continued to pass, Hui Yuhao remained completely immersed in his revelations and realizations, his emotions incessantly rippling as he did so. Tang Wutong is Donga, and she's back by my side. Just that single thought gave Hui Yuhao a lot of emotional clarity. Even though he'd lost his 3 ultimate Haodong skills in the process, he didn't regret anything for even a second. What could bring him more joy or pleasant surprise than his lover returning to him? But at the same time, he quickly realized how important emotions were for self-invented soul skills. Emotions were considered to be a part of spiritual power, yet at the same time, they weren't equivalent. They could be considered an inexplicable force with an abstruse origin. Back then, the most important reason behind his 3 ultimate Haodong skills being so powerful was due to them containing his intense emotions. At the same time, the repercussions and residual effects brought about after using them also stemmed from his emotions. Since emotions can increase the power of self-invented soul skills, does that mean that I can fuse my emotions into my other self-invented soul skills now that I've lost my 3 ultimate Haodong skills? The Goddess of Light was undoubtedly Hui Yuhao's fundamental self-invented soul skill. The truth was that he'd adapted his 3 ultimate Haodong skills from it. Thus, now that he couldn't use them anymore, it seemed that he'd have to put more effort back into his Goddess of Light. The emotions that his 3 ultimate Haodong skills relied on were longing and yearning. Now that Wutong was back by his side, those feelings had to transform, but into what? Love. Yes, love is the answer. This thought had barely surfaced in Hui Yuhao's mind when he suddenly felt an intense quiver in his spiritual sea. In the next moment, the love in his heart immediately flooded towards Tang Wutong like a tidal wave. Tang Wutong's beautiful frame trembled a little in response. Her spiritual sea had originally been extremely messy and chaotic, as Wang Dong's memory had only been awakened a short time ago, and she hadn't yet managed to completely integrate the memories of her childhood. She felt her heart and body quiver intensely as she was stimulated by Huiyuhao's intense feelings of love, and a dash of rosiness appeared on her cheeks as her lips gradually tilted into a faint smile. These dense feelings of love surging into her mind were akin to the most potent natural treasures as they nourished her spiritual sea and supported the fusion of her memories. Love was a notion for eternity, only love could truly last forever. Whether she was Wang Donga or Tang Wutong didn't matter, her name was only a label. Tang Wutong had insisted that she was Tang Wutong rather than Wang Donga because her memories hadn't been completely fused yet. In her heart, she'd been a little afraid that her feelings towards Huiyuhao weren't genuine, which had caused her to have a little resistance towards him in her heart ever since recovering her memories. But at this moment, as she was smothered in Huiyuhao's dense feelings, her memories began to fuse at an accelerated rate. Slowly, her entire being's emotions began to change as she was continuously buffeted by his love. Wang Donga's originally deep-seated love for Huiyuhao was guided out and took the driver's seat, merging together with love that Huiyuhao was emanating. Their Haodong power quietly sublimated, while their love continued to ripple and undulate away from and because of that sublimation. They weren't just fusing their martial souls anymore, their emotions and spirits were also fusing. This was the true meaning of coming together to become one. When Huiyuhao felt the reciprocated love coming from Tang Wutong, he was overjoyed. Love was a mutual feeling, thus only with mutual love could it continue to sublimate and evolve. At this moment, the type of love that Tang Wutong and Huiyuhao were feeling was that type of sublimating love. Their overflowing emotions began to encircle their hearts and souls, and faint white halos appeared around their bodies. Gentle undulations could soon be seen as their bodies were cocooned in light. Their soul power, spiritual power, and spirits were being rinsed and doused in their dense feelings of love. Slowly but surely, their soul power was changing, and the golden light from within the trident on Tang Wutong's forehead began to circulate within her body. Strange transformations also began to happen to Huiyuhao's soul power and aura. I love you, Donga. I love you, Wutong. Huiyuhao's voice was filled with love as it resonated within his mind. Suddenly, Huiyuhao felt his spirits be invigorated, and in the next moment felt his spiritual power seem to leave his body. He'd experienced a similar feeling before, but that was when he'd channeled his spiritual power out of his body. Now that his spiritual power was in the concrete material realm, his spiritual power leaving his body along with his spirit didn't mean anything was wrong. But this time seemed different. Huiyuhao studied himself closely, only to realize to his astonishment that it wasn't his spiritual power that was leaving his body. Instead, it was his own, actual spirit leaving his body. Yes, just his spirit, without any spiritual power accompanying it. Human spirits were extremely weak. Once they left one's body, they would continuously dissipate. The moment that he realized his spirit was leaving his body, he quickly realized that there was also a faint white layer surrounding his spirit that seemed to be protecting it from dissipating. With his spirit currently in midair, Huiyuhao could see Tang Wutong and himself with their palms pressed against each other's, cultivating. Gentle white light surrounded their bodies, and Huiyuhao could still vividly feel their sublimating soul power, spiritual power, and emotions, despite currently looking down at himself. What's happening? Why has my spirit left my body by itself? Huiyuhao attempted to control himself and return to his body, but he realized to his surprise that he couldn't make his spirit move at all. At the next moment, some kind of strange force appeared in the ether that instantly pulled his spirit out of the sea god's pavilion. Once his spirit exited the golden tree, it began to rise into the sky. The sun was radiant outside, and shone down upon the entire Shrek Academy, but a shred of panic still appeared in Huiyuhao's mind. This was the first time that he'd come across such a strange situation. He had no idea what was going to happen. His spirit had left his body, and was continuously rising through the air. It wasn't a great feeling. Huiyuhao could feel himself getting further and further away from his own body. Even though his senses were still connected, he couldn't control his spirit's movements in the sky at all. Why is this happening? What's happening to me? Huiyuhao couldn't find the answer, intense fear and panic beginning to permeate his mind. He had been through so much to get Tang Wutong back at his side, yet his spirit had still left his body in such a strange fashion. What exactly is happening? What's happened? No, I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave Wutong. I still have to protect and love her. Intense fear and panic caused a wave of acute emotional ripples to spread from his spirit, as he tried to struggle out of the restraints binding his movements. Right at that moment, a gentle aura suddenly enveloped his spirit. This aura was extremely strange, as there seemed to be an immense amount of pure emotions undulating within it. After it appeared, Hui Yuhao felt an incredibly comfortable feeling course through his spirit, as if he'd been immersed in warm spring water. This nourishing feeling made him so comfortable that he wanted to moan, all traces of panic, fear, and negative emotions disappearing without a trace. Instead, small feelings of comfort and trust had appeared. What exactly is happening? Hui Yuhao was extremely intelligent. If he couldn't at least make a guess about his situation, then he wouldn't be Hui Yuhao. The aura filled with comfort that had nourished his spirit had immediately made him realize that his spirit leaving his body wasn't because of his own cultivation. Rather, some external power had forcibly pulled his spirit from his body. All the negative feelings in his spirit had been washed away, thus all that was left was complete astonishment. What kind of strength could forcibly pull my spirit out of my body? Hui Yuhao's spiritual power had already reached the concrete material realm. Furthermore, he also had Wang Qiu's destiny skull and its skill destiny's adjudication, which granted him immunity to 3 spiritual type attacks per day. Back then, the evil eye tyrant king hadn't been able to kill Hui Yuhao with its incredibly powerful attack because he'd used destiny's adjudication to escape with his life. However, this force that was currently controlling his spirit had rendered him unable to resist at all. How powerful would his opponent have to be to achieve this? Even though Hui Yuhao wasn't sure why this was happening, he could feel that whoever was doing this to him had to be an extremely powerful individual who didn't harbor any ill intentions against him. Else, that person wouldn't have placated his negative emotions. Unless this is the work of an ultimate dolor who has hidden himself from the prying eyes of the public. And it can't be just any ultimate dolor. He or she must be a spiritual type ultimate dolor whose power far exceeds that of the darkness holy dragon and the death god dolor. This is the only possible explanation. In fact, this ultimate dolor could very well be more powerful than the beast god. If not, why would the beast god fail to protect me when I possess his reverse scale? There can only be one answer: the beast god is not aware of this. Young fellow, stop guessing. Your guesses are all wrong. Hui Yuhao heard a gentle voice from afar. Following which, he felt his senses turned inside out as everything that his soul could sense spiraled into a chaotic mess. He could feel a formless force transforming his surroundings into radiant colors before the colors started to pale into black and white. The black and white alternated continuously between one another as Hui Yuhao found himself morphing between countless forms. But regardless of how the external world changed, Hui Yuhao managed to keep his soul intact and out of harm's way. He managed to dispel all distractions from his mind and return to a calm state of mind by focusing on his spiritual energy and retaining it. After a temporary shock, he was able to collect himself. But he knew very well that regardless of what this external force was, it was not something that he could fend off. Hence, he knew there wasn't much point going against someone who was a lot more powerful than him, so chose to sit and wait for that person's next move. After all, they didn't seem to bear any malevolent intentions. He or she had merely abducted his soul. Since I can't figure out what you are up to, all I can do is wait. While it was only a short while, it felt like an eternity. His surroundings suddenly turned clear, and much to his surprise, Hui Yuhao found himself regaining control over his soul. He was a mountain valley, a valley which did not seem to be particularly unique. It was filled with blooming flowers, as well as grass and trees which seemed to be radiating vitality. The tall, majestic trees spread their branches and leaves to form a shady canopy. Up above the valley in the sky, rainbow clouds floated by from time to time. Hui Yuhao had regained his human shape, but he was currently in his spiritual form. The only perception he had of the external world could only be described as comfortable. At this very moment, a peculiar thought formed in his head. How wonderful would it be if I could breathe in all the fresh air within this valley? The air in this valley must be very refreshing. It must be filled with the natural chi of heaven and earth. He found himself edging towards the depths of the valley subconsciously, and a pebbled path soon appeared before his feet. The path, which was sandwiched by the different flora beside it, extended into the depths of the valley. With the experience he had, Hui Yuhao was able to identify many treasured herbs and spices. However, there were still so many plants which he could not recognize. Every single one of them seemed to be brimming with spiritual energy. The winding path continued straight into the center of the valley. Hui Yuhao continued his walk for over 10 minutes until the sight before his eyes transformed abruptly. A pavilion had appeared before his eyes. Hui Yuhao could see two people sitting within the pavilion. There was a good-looking young man on the left who looked approximately 27 years old. His long golden hair covered his shoulders as he exuded an all-encompassing Buddhist aura. There was an old man sitting opposite him. The old man's head was covered with snow-white hair, and his looks could not be plainer. However, he did not seem to possess the fatigue and soulless vibes which plagued most elderly people. Both of them did not seem to radiate any fluctuations of spiritual energy, and appeared to be engrossed in their game of chess. Hui Yuhao knew nothing about chess, but he was certain that the two people before him were the ones who had connected his soul to this heaven-like place. Even though he didn't know where this place was, he had already calmed himself down after being brought here. Hui Yuhao made his way to the pavilion slowly, and stopped by the chessboard. He stood there quietly and observed their game. Even though Hui Yuhao didn't know how to play chess, he knew that one should not speak while watching a game of chess. Not disturbing someone else's game was a matter of manners and being polite. This game of chess appeared to be ending soon. The old man's brows were locked in a frown for an extended period of time before he moved his chess piece hesitantly. Conversely, the young man reacted very quickly and confidently, as though everything was going according to his calculations. "Teacher, you have lost your composure. I'm afraid there's no chance of you beating me anymore," the golden-haired young man smiled. The old man scolded laughingly, "You little brat. Since we started playing chess, you have never given me a chance to win. Sometimes, I regret training and guiding you for all those years." The young man revealed a smile. "All right. Come on. Don't be angry. How about this? I'll prepare our lunch for today." The old man was visibly excited by the prospect of the young man's suggestion as he replied, "Really?" The young man nodded and reassured the old man, "Cooking has always been an interest of mine. Why would I lie to you when you were the one who taught me how to cook?" The old man seemed to be very pleased as he surrendered the chess game and spoke, Okay. I surrender. Now go and prepare lunch for us." The young man with the golden hair nodded and said, "Okay. Could you put the chess pieces away for me?" "All right." The old man waved his hand, and before anyone could see how he did it, the chess pieces floated naturally and separated themselves into clusters of black and white before returning to the boxes beside the chessboard. Hui Yuhao was shocked by what he had just witnessed. The old man was able to move those pieces without giving away any fluctuation in his power. The young man with the golden hair stood up and stretched before heading to the other end of the pavilion. As he walked over there, he waved his hand at Hui Yuhao before saying, "Come and join us, little friend." Previously, when the young man was talking to the old man, Hui Yuhao didn't sense anything wrong or unnatural with the way he spoke. But now that he was speaking to Hui Yuhao, he found to his surprise that the young man's voice was exactly the same as the voice he had heard after his soul was sucked out of his body. Is he the powerful guy who brought me here? However, there was no way he could turn the young man down at this moment. Thus, Hui Yuhao acknowledged the man's invitation and went after him. The old man remained seated where he was as his face revealed a smile. He muttered to himself, "It seems like that little brat has also had moments when his emotions waver. If not, why would you be so anxious? But I must say your decision is quite unexpected. In fact, it is borderline insane. This is literally snatching one's prey from the jaws of a tiger, isn't it? But I must say I like it." Hui Yuhao followed the young man with the golden hair to the other end of the pavilion, and noticed a small courtyard not too far from it. The entire courtyard was made from wood, and there were a few children playing around in it. There was a beautiful lady dressed in a red dress taking care of the children. Not too far from them, another beautiful lady dressed in blue was eating something. All of them seemed to be very blissful. This was obviously a family who was happily residing in a paradise away from the prying eyes of normal people. Hui Yuhao suddenly felt envious of what he saw, even though he wasn't sure why he was feeling that way. When can I form a family with Wutong and live in a paradise like this? That would be so great. We would have a few children, and live happily ever after. The young man with the golden hair smiled and asked, "Are you very envious of what you're seeing?" Hui Yuhao nodded without hesitation. The young man smiled awkwardly. Actually, if anyone were to lead such a life for an extended period of time, he or she would most definitely feel lonely. I have multiple wives, but they are often not around me. Only the two of them, the ones before you, stayed to accompany me. The rest of them left to go out and play, and I don't know when they'll return. Multiple wives? Hui Yuhao had not expected the young man to share this with him. He could not help but shake his head and reply, "Isn't one wife enough already? The more partners one has, the likelier it is for people to part ways." The young man squeezed out a smile and replied, "What you said makes sense. However, sometimes, it is not up to one to make that decision. All right, let's not talk about this anymore. We're going to prepare lunch now. It's not easy keeping this huge group of people happy and full every day." As he spoke, he led Hui Yuhao into a room within the courtyard. It was almost as if the two beautiful ladies and the children did not see them at all. They merely continued with what they were doing. The young man led Hui Yuhao into what seemed to be a kitchen. From outside the kitchen, it did not seem to be particularly big. But after entering the room, Hui Yuhao found much to his surprise that it was much larger than it seems. It was at least 100 square meters. All the ingredients were placed in an organized manner in a certain area within the kitchen, while another area was reserved for the actual cooking process. The young man instructed, "You can just stand here and watch. How much you would learn will depend on how much you can infer and absorb." As he finished his sentence, he made his way to the chopping area. At that very instant, Hui Yuhao could sense a change within the young man. His breathing suddenly became slightly labored as a strong wave of pressure suffocated Hui Yuhao's soul. Following which, the young man made his move. As he moved his right hand gently, his index and middle fingers extended into a small cloth bag next to the chopping board, and withdrew a small knife. The knife emerged from the bag with a reflective flash. It was less than 5 inches long, and its tip appeared to be very delicate. The blade and the handle appeared to be equal in length. The blade seemed to be exuding a Mayan blue flash, and there was also a scary-looking carving on the side of it. He waved his left hand and produced a huge empty plate before him effortlessly. At the same time, 9 similar-looking cucumbers flew towards him. Is he actually cooking? But why would he use such a small knife? That knife is even smaller than the carving knife I use to make soul tools. Hui Yuhao continued watching with many questions in his head. This video will end here.